Good evening. This 77th meeting of the 72nd term of the Baltimore City Council is now called to order. Please turn off all cell phones or put them on vibrate. Tonight's invocation will be delivered by Pastor Darren Farmer of the Upper Room Church. Following the invocation, we will have the Pledge of Allegiance.
Let us bow for a word of prayer. God, we love you because you are so merciful to us, and God, we adore you because you choose to give us life, health, and strength, the activity of our limbs. Bless us in this moment that we may be unified, that you'll be glorified through this city of Baltimore. Give us grace and more grace. Thank you for showing us mercy to an undeserving people. We say thank you to a deserving God. If we had 10,000 tongues, we surely couldn't praise you enough. So even in this setting and even in this moment, we say hallelujah and thank you, Jesus. We love you, our Father. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Tonight's Showcase Baltimore presenter is Bernard Jones from the Be More Clubhouse.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen of the City Council. My name is Bernard Jones from Be More Clubhouse. Be More Clubhouse is a Baltimore-based nonprofit organization which empowers adults living with mental illness to lead meaningful and productive lives of their choice in the community. The Clubhouse model had its inception in New York in the 1940s. Today, there are over 300 clubhouses in over 30 countries worldwide. It is a strength-based, non-clinical model of mental health rehabilitation. Be More Clubhouse is an independent membership organization, but has been accredited by Clubhouse International based on our 37 standards of operation to ensure an ethical and effective experience for each of our members. To me, Be More Clubhouse is a place for people like me to grow and expand on their potential. When I first came to Be More Clubhouse, I did not know what to expect. My goal was to find a career, not just a job. After participating in the Clubhouse community for some time, I realized that I needed to pursue some higher education to reach my newfound career goals. The Clubhouse helped me apply for 3 scholarships, one of which I actually received, the Tony Bridges Scholarship. Now I'm on track to graduate from Baltimore City Community College in December of this year. After I received my associate's degree in cybersecurity and assurance at BCCC, I know that the Clubhouse will help me make strides towards my bachelor's degree at Coppin State University. Not only was I able to be on the receiving end of help and support, now that I have more confidence in myself, I am able to give back in a meaningful way. The Clubhouse provides me with the chance to share my new skills with other members who are looking for work or need help getting back to school. At Be More Clubhouse, they help you thrive in whichever goals you try to achieve. Members and staff at the Clubhouse are friendly and professional, which make me look forward to coming as often as I can. There are 4 different work units for members to participate in: membership, communications, culinary, and career development. Whether your goal is to learn how to make nutritious meals for yourself or whether you want to learn how to use a computer. If you need help with job readiness or want to learn how to use a database, the Clubhouse becomes what members need it to be. Part of our career development unit is a transitional employment program which enables members who have been out of the workforce to find meaningful and productive work out in the community through employment partners. Before I became a member at the Clubhouse, I was in and out of mental health facilities. I was bouncing around from job to job and I felt lost. Since coming to the Clubhouse, I am more organized in life. I have a renewed sense of purpose, and I feel like I've become a better person and a better man. I've also been able to develop more coping skills for living with my mental illness. Baltimore City as a whole benefits from the work of the Clubhouse as well. Our members have 50% lower costs to the Maryland Public Mental Health System, which indicates that people are staying out of hospitals, staying healthy and staying out of hospitals. Clubhouse members around the world are also employed at the twice of rate with serious mental illness in the general population. Even though we can see that the clubhouse changes lives for individuals, the work that we do makes the city a better place to live for everyone. It has been an honor to speak in front of you today, and I hope the same passion for mental health that prompted you to invite us lives on in the legislation of the city. Mental health is one of the most important issues in front of us, and we have proven that thoughtful and intentional work is a way to overcome some of the challenges in our way. We are grateful for your past support and eagerly await the next chapter of our ongoing relationship. Thank you and God bless.
Thank you. I had the pleasure of visiting the clubhouse a few months ago, and anybody that hasn't on the council, I would urge that you do that. They do some great work, and it's not that far. You can actually walk it. It's up on Franklin. Roll call. The clerk will now call the roll of the members.
President Scott, Cohen, McCray, Dorsey, Henry, Schleifer, Middleton, Pinkett, Burnett, Bullock, Reisinger, Costello, Stokes, Snead, Clark. Mr. President, we have a quorum.
We will now proceed with the adoption of the journal.
Mr. President, the journal of the January 27, 2020 proceedings are on the council members' desks.
Without objection, the journal will be adopted. The journal is adopted. Bills signed by the mayor can be found on page 3 of your agenda. Bills to be introduced.
City Council Bill 20-0490, Urban Renewal, Carroll Camden Renewal Area Designation and Urban Renewal Plan, for the purpose of repealing the existing Carroll Camden Urban Renewal Plan and replacing it by designating as a renewal area an area situated in Baltimore City, Maryland, known as Carroll Camden, bounded generally by I-95 and Russell Street on the south, Monroe Street on the west, I-395 South Packer Street and Austin Street on the north, and Russell Street and Coleman Street on the east, establishing the objectives of the plan, establishing permitted land uses in the renewal area, providing that where there may be a conflict between the provisions of the renewal plan and the provisions of any plan unit development, the provisions of the plan unit development control, providing review requirements and controls for all plans for new construction, providing that the provisions of the Baltimore City Zoning Code apply to properties in the renewal area, establishing controls for off-street parking facilities, authorizing the conditions for acquisition of properties in the renewal area, providing for a review of the Department of Housing and Community Development of development or rehabilitation plans in the renewal area with respect to the conformance with the provisions of the renewal plan, providing for community notification of any permit application for the development or redevelopment of any property within the boundaries of the renewal area, creating disposition lots and providing for specific controls on specific lots, providing for the term of the plan, providing for community review of all proposed amendments to the plan, making provisions of this ordinance severable, approving appendices and exhibits to the plan, waiving certain content and procedural requirements, making the provisions of this ordinance severable, providing for the application of this ordinance in conjunction with certain other ordinances, and providing for a special effective date. Sponsor, City Council President, on behalf of the administration.
This has been assigned to the Housing and Urban Affairs Committee.
City Council Bill 20-0491, Charter Amendment, City Auditor Powers and Duties, for the purpose of authorizing the City Auditor to issue subpoenas to certain individuals and entities, requiring the City Auditor to provide a copy of certain completed audit reports to the agency audited, and submitting this amendment to the qualified voters of the city for adoption or rejection. Sponsors, Henry, President Scott, Cohen, Dorsey, Middleton, Burnett, Bullock, Clark.
Please add Councilwoman Snead, Councilman Rising, and Councilman Scheifler as co-sponsors. Chair recognizes Councilman Henry.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is a pretty straightforward request. The city auditor or the equivalent in other cities generally have the power to subpoena, to compel agencies to produce documents when needed. We have had complaints from previous city auditors about agencies not submitting documents in a timely fashion. I understand that we are still getting used to the idea of regular audits of city agencies. Here in Baltimore, we do not yet have the culture of compliance that some other places have, and it might be helpful in bringing that culture together for it to be understood that the city auditor can use the courts to compel those documents if need be. So I appreciate the co-sponsors, and I look forward to adding this to the list of charter amendments that we are discussing with the public.
Please add Councilman Pinkett as a co-sponsor. This has been assigned to the Equity and Structure Committee.
City Council Bill 20-0492, Charter Amendment, City Council Reduction in Size for the purpose of reducing the size of the City Council, providing for certain members to be elected at large, requiring that the President of the City Council, the Council Vice President, and the Council's representative to the Planning Commission be at-large members of the Council, clarifying, correcting, and conforming certain language, and submitting this amendment to the qualified voters of the city for adoption or rejection. Sponsor, Henry.
Chair recognizes Councilman Henry.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is the last of 4 charter amendments that were originally introduced in 2012 as part of a package of charter amendments aimed at trying to tweak the power dynamic between the mayor and the city council. And one of the ways to do that is a smaller city council means each city council member is harder to marginalize if you're the mayor. If you represent 1/14 of the city, it's easier for a mayor who's having a fight with a council person to disrespect one district, knowing that's only a small percentage of their own citywide base, than if, for example, many of us remember when we had 6 multi-member districts where each council person effectively represented an entire 1/6 of the city. And it was much harder for a mayor to write off an entire section of the city when they would get into a fight with an individual city council person. The other factor that encouraged me to bring this amendment back into consideration is when we had 3 district members in each of those 6 districts, everybody in Baltimore had 4 people on the council that they could call who represented them. They had their 3 district members and the council president elected at large. When we moved to this 14 single-member district configuration, we only reduced the size of the council by about 1/4, but we cut the number of people that you can call for help in half. So now there's only 2 people in this body that any given person in Baltimore City can literally say, I voted for that person and they represent me. If we had more at-large representatives, which many other cities our size and larger do, we can go back to having more people that you can call who actually represent you individually. And we would have the extra added benefit of changing the power dynamic in a more equitable way with the mayor. So thank you, Mr. President. I look forward to adding this charter amendment to the conversation with the public. Thank you.
This has been assigned to the Equity and Structure Committee.
City Council Bill 20-0493, Urban Renewal, Coldstream, Homestead, Montebello Amendment. For the purpose of amending the urban renewal plan for Coldstream, Homestead, Montebello to provide an enforcement mechanism for violation of the regulation that prohibits the storage of materials outside buildings, except as permitted by the city's code regulations regarding storage receptacles for garbage, trash, or debris, and conforming certain language, waiving certain content and procedural requirements, making the provisions of this ordinance severable, providing for the application of this ordinance in conjunction with certain other ordinances, and providing for special effective dates. Sponsor, Clark.
Chair recognizes Councilwoman Clark.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. This is an amendment to the urban renewal plan for the Coldstream, Homestead, Montebello urban renewal area and neighborhood. Basically, ever since we had an urban renewal ordinance in this area, it has been prohibited for businesses to store articles of business outdoors. They have to be under roof, they have to be in a building, they cannot be sitting in the front yard. It's just the law as it always was. We have some businesses who have never conformed with that law, And it's in the face of the people who know that things should be neater and nicer and more orderly than they are. And so we call on code enforcement. They come, they write citations, the owners pay the fines, and it goes on for years. So this bill says, okay, if you're one of these, you have 1 year to build a building and get your articles inside. And at the end of that, you lose your use and occupancy permit. You're out of business. That's what it is. We're tired of how many decades of violence and fines being paid. We don't want the money. We want the kind of community this Chum area requires. Thank you.
Thank you. This has been assigned to the Housing and Urban Affairs Committee.
City Council Bill 20-0494, zoning conditional use banquet hall, 5401 Bel Air Road, for the purpose of permitting, subject to certain conditions, the establishment, maintenance, and operation of a banquet hall on the property known as 5401 Bel Air Road, as outlined in red on the accompanying plat. Sponsor, McCray.
Chair recognizes Councilwoman McCray.
Thank you, Mr. President. This bill is for a conditional use banquet hall at 5401 Bel Air Road. It would be located within my largest community, which would be the Frankfurt community, and the Frankfurt Improvement Association fully supports it. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. This has been assigned to the Land Use Committee.
City Council Bill 20-0495, pesticide control and regulation, for the purpose of regulating the use and application of pesticides in Baltimore City, defining certain terms, requiring certain notices at the time of pesticide purchase, requiring certain notices prior to and after pesticide application, requiring marker placement after certain pesticide applications, prohibiting the use of certain pesticides in specified areas, prohibiting the use and application of glyphosate and chlorpyrifos, prohibiting, another one,
Yeah, neonicotinoid.
neonicotinoid, y'all know what I'm trying to say. Pesticide use on city-owned property, establishing certain penalties, and providing for a special effective date. Sponsors, Clark, Sneed, Dorsey, Middleton.
Pleased to have Councilman Reisinger as a co-sponsor, Councilman Henry as a co-sponsor, Councilman Burnett, Council President Scott as co-sponsors, Councilwoman Sneed as co-sponsor. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Clark.
Oh, thanks for getting the numbers up there. I was getting worried before I even began. Mr. President, members of the council, just bear with me for a few minutes while I talk about this legislation. I think it's very important. And I've worked awful hard on the bill and even harder on the pronunciation, and I still haven't succeeded on the latter. This bill, all right. The Environmental Protection Agency has something called the registration of pesticides in the United States, pesticides that are out there for sale. They also have what they call listed pesticides. That's a smaller list inside of the big list that is minimally risky, according to the feds, of course. Well, let's take their word on this. This legislation limits Baltimore City, public and private land, to using only minimal risk pesticides. Now, specifically, this totally prohibits the use of 3 pesticides, well, 2, and then 1 I'll explain, but let me hold it up, and thanks a lot, Mr. Announcer, for your brave efforts. I should have told you ahead of time. No one can pronounce it. This is how you spell and pronounce glyphosate. Roundup is what it is. In this bill, it's gone from the city of Baltimore. It cannot be used, private or public, and it it, even if in an emergency situation we have to go to the big list for something, it can't be one of the choices. You can't use it in the city. Second, chlorpyrifos. The advocates call this the Birds, Bees, and Babies Protection Act to bar this. This is also prohibited. And it is something that hurts nature, but also very, very much young children, even those in utero. And finally, neonicotinoid is prohibited on public lands in Baltimore City in this bill. Now, the public areas are also prohibited to use the first two. Nobody can use those two, but it's the city that can't use neonicotinoid. So that's what's in this bill. Now, we prohibit the use, we don't prohibit the sale, but in this bill, stores that sell these things that are in the city must post signs that say, by the way, at the pesticide corner of the store, by the way, these following pesticides are prohibited for use in Baltimore City, and post that near where you would buy it so that you don't if you are using it in the city. It prohibits the use by a contractor, etc., by private people. Me, in my house, if I had any grass, it affects what I can use as well. I can't use those things. And I can't use anything but minimally risky pesticides. So thank you for joining in. I hope that we can pass this bill. It is based in large part on the model bill that was passed in Montgomery County. We went over to visit and talk with the people that did that bill. And we took some health department reps with us as well. And this is close to that because, one, it's a model here in Maryland, but also it has survived court appeals. We don't want to go to court. We want to go to a safer Baltimore where what we spray on the ground isn't hurting the birds, the bees, the babies, and the next door neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you. This has been assigned to the Health Committee. Also, please add Councilman Bullock as a co-sponsor. Resolutions to be introduced.
City Council Resolution 20-0194R, Baltimore's strategic response to the Wuhan coronavirus. For the purpose of inviting representatives from the Baltimore City Health Department, the Mayor's Office of Emergency Management, the Baltimore Police Department, the Baltimore City Fire Department, and the Baltimore City Department of Finance to brief the City Council on Baltimore's strategic response to the Wuhan coronavirus. Sponsors: President Scott, Burnett, Cohen, Dorsey, Henry, Middleton, Pinkett, Bullock, Clark.
Thank you. Please add Councilman Reisinger as a co-sponsor, Councilwoman Snead as a co-sponsor, Councilman Scheifler as a co-sponsor. I think this is very simple. We know how serious this virus is and how this is spreading throughout the world. We're just asking Councilman Burnett and the Health Committee to bring in the agencies to see exactly how they're preparing and preparing not only to deal with this issue, but also to get information about how Baltimoreans can protect themselves when they're here, and especially as they're traveling abroad. This has been assigned to the Health Committee.
City Council Resolution 20-0195R, Informational Hearing Missing Persons. For the purpose of inviting representatives from the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice, the Mayor's Office of Homeless Services, the Department of Housing and Community Development, the Baltimore Police Department, the State's Attorney's Office, and the Baltimore City Sheriff's Office to help the City Council understand the scope of the problem of missing persons in Baltimore City and to explain how agencies work together to find missing persons. Sponsors: Burnett, President Scott, Cohen, McCray, Dorsey, Henry, Middleton, Pinkett, Bullock, Snead, Clark.
Please add Councilman Scheifler as a co-sponsor, Councilman Reisinger as a co-sponsor, Chair recognizes Councilman Burnett.
Thank you, Mr. President. So this is exactly as described. The issue of missing people, missing children is a huge issue in the city of Baltimore. I know that all of my colleagues have received requests for assistance in searching for constituents that have gone missing. The other hat that I wear is the co-chair of the Baltimore City Human Trafficking Task Force, and one of the statistics that we know to be true across the country is that children that run away, 1 in 4 of them will encounter a human trafficker or a trafficker within 48 hours. And so we want to know what the response is, what is the police department doing and our law enforcement agencies doing on this issue, and how we can better improve our response. So I look forward to a very helpful and informational hearing, so that we can ensure that if people do go missing or run away, that there is a robust response from the city in getting them back home safely. Thank you.
Thank you. This has been assigned to the Health Committee.
City Council Resolution 20-0196R, request for state action, ranked choice voting or open primaries, for the purpose of calling on the state to pass enabling legislation that authorizes Baltimore City to adopt either a ranked choice or open primary election voting system to ensure inclusive and democratic elections for city officials. Sponsors: Henry, President Scott, Cohen, Dorsey, Burnett, Bullock, Sneed.
Please add Councilman Reisinger as a co-sponsor, Councilman Schleifer as a co-sponsor, Councilman Pinkett as a co-sponsor. Chair recognizes Councilman Henry.
Thank you, Mr. President. As some of us here are especially and painfully aware, this year we have, for the third time in the last 6 and the second time in a row, more than 20 candidates in the Democratic primary for mayor. And statistically speaking, going off of early polls, there is a good chance that someone may win that race with less than 30% of the total vote. If we had either ranked choice or open primaries, there would be a method to ensure that the person who was actually preferred by a majority of those voting is the person who moves on to win that race. But right now, that doesn't necessarily work with the system we have. Last year, this council passed a resolution supporting ranked choice and open primaries in the sense of asking the General Assembly to give us the power to decide if we wanted to move forward with either of those or with some combination. Because at the end of the day, that would impact the people who live here in Baltimore, and it would be easier for the people who live here in Baltimore to be part of the conversation on whether we should do that if that conversation was held here in the city council chambers, as opposed to being held down in Annapolis 45 minutes away with no good public transportation as a way to get there and give your input. So I ask the council to, again, tonight, tell the General Assembly we want them to give us the authority to make this decision here in Baltimore City. I thank my co-sponsors, and I move to suspend the rules to permit immediate adoption.
Roll call.
President Scott.
Yes.
Councilman Cohen. Yes. Councilwoman McCray. No. Councilman Dorsey. Yes. Councilman Henry.
Yes.
Councilman Schleifer. Yes. Vice President Middleton. No. Councilman Pinkett. Yes. Councilman Burnett. Yes. Councilman Bullock. Yes. Councilman Reisinger. Yes. Councilman Costello. No. Councilman Stokes. No. Councilwoman Sneed. Yes. Councilwoman Clark. 10 in the affirmative, 5 in the negative.
All right. The motion is approved. This resolution has been adopted.
Well, no, we suspended the rules.
Oh, suspended the rule.
Yeah. So now the resolution is before us. I move the resolution favorable.
President Scott.
Stop for a second. It's not a fire alarm? All right, good. Continue, sir.
President Scott,
Yes.
Councilman Cohen, Councilwoman McCray, Councilman Dorsey, Councilman Henry,
Yes.
Councilman Schleifer, Vice President Middleton, Councilman Pinkett, Councilman Burnett, Councilman Bullock, Councilman Reisinger, Councilman Costello, Councilman Stokes, Councilwoman Sneed, Councilwoman Clark. 10 in the affirmative, 5 in the negative.
Thank you. This resolution has been adopted.
Thank you.
City Council Resolution 20-0197R in support of Senate Bill 315 and House Bill 561, Community Choice Energy, for the purpose of requesting that the Honorable Chair and members of the Finance Committee and the Economic Matters Committee take this show of support under consideration during their deliberations on Senate Bill 315 and House Bill 561, respectively, both of which authorize a county or municipal organization or a group of counties or municipal corporations to form or join a community choice aggregator. Sponsors: President Scott, Cohen, Dorsey, Henry, Middleton, Burnett, Bullock, Sneed.
Thank you. Thank you. Maryland ranks 13th highest in the country when it comes to energy bills. Baltimore families making 175% of the federal poverty line pay 11% of their income towards energy alone. This bill would allow municipalities to purchase their own energy supply, thus allowing them to provide more cost-efficient energy, and also with an eye to the future and to the climate crisis that we all know exists, contrary to popular belief of some elected officials in Washington, D.C., also allowing us to look at renewable energy and more environmentally friendly energy that we can provide ourselves to our citizens. That's the simple request of this legislation. Chair recognizes. Please add Councilwoman Clark, Councilman Reisinger as co-sponsors, Chair, Councilman Pinkett as co-sponsors. Chair recognizes Councilman Burnett. Immediate adoption. Chair recognizes Councilman Dorsey.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a point of information. Curious who the sponsors of these bills are in the House and Senate.
Oh, I will tell you when we leave. I left my notes on my desk, Councilman, so that's my fault. I will give it to you as soon as we go out of the chambers. Please add Councilman Costello as a co-sponsor.
Mr. President, I make a motion for immediate adoption of the resolution.
Roll call. Don't need it. Roll call.
President Scott,
Yes.
Councilman Cohen, Councilwoman McCray, Councilman Dorsey, Councilman Henry, Councilman Schleifer, Vice President Middleton, Councilman Pinkett, Councilman Burnett, Councilman Bullock, Councilman Reisinger, Councilman Costello, Councilman Stokes, Councilwoman Sneed, Councilwoman Clark.
Thank you. The resolution has been adopted.
Next one. City Council Resolution 20-0198R, request for state action. Establish a Maryland constitutional right for environmental justice and equity for the purpose of calling on the General Assembly to pass and the governor to support House Bill 517, which would enable an amendment to the Maryland Constitution guaranteeing clean air, clean water, a stable environment, and a healthy and more equitable environment for all Marylanders to be placed on the ballot for referendum by Maryland voters. Sponsors: Burnett, President Scott, Cohen, McCray, Dorsey, Henry, Middleton, Pinkett, Burnett, Sneed, Clark.
Please add Councilman Reisinger as a co-sponsor. Chair recognizes Councilman Burnett.
Thank you, Mr. President. So what this is again asking for this body to support House Bill 517 to amend the state constitution to specify that our natural resources and common property of every person, and we have a right to those things being clean air, clean water, a forest, trees. When we talk about wastewater and other environmental issues that have an impact on our health, it is important that we establish that we have a right to these things, a right to a clean environment and safe environment, especially as you mentioned earlier, Mr. President, the pending issues that we're already living under when it comes to climate change. This bill would also provide more protections for individual citizens who've been harmed by companies, corporations, et cetera, that are, in poisoning our environment. And so the idea is to support, get Annapolis to do this for us. Sorry, it's been a long day, y'all. So I'm asking for support of House Bill 517 to, continue the work we've been doing as this body to better protect our environment, whether that be from pesticides, the Clean Air Act, plastic bags, styrofoam, et cetera. It's just a step in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Councilman Burnett.
I make a motion to move.
Before you do that, any other further co-sponsors before we move this? Thank you. Chair recognizes Councilman Burnett.
I move the resolution for immediate adoption, Mr. President.
Roll call.
President Scott.
Yes.
Councilman Cohen. Councilwoman McCray. Councilman Dorsey. Councilman Henry. Councilman Schleifer. Vice President Middleton. Councilman Pinkett. Councilman Burnett. Councilman Bullock. Councilman Reisner. Councilman Costello. Councilman Stokes. Councilwoman Sneed. Councilwoman Clark.
The motion is approved. This resolution has been adopted. Consent calendar. You can find the consent calendar in Section A at the back of the agenda. Without objection, the consent calendar will be approved. The consent calendar is approved. Committee reports. We will now move to bills on second reader. Equity and Structure Committee.
City Council Bill 19.
Chair recognizes Councilman Costello.
Mr. President, I move that we read short titles for second and third reader for the duration of the hearing.
Without objection, short titles will be read for the remainder of the hearing. Short titles for the remainder of the hearing.
City Council Bill 19-0378, Ethics Board Administration and Staff.
Chair recognizes Councilman Henry.
Thank you, Mr. President. The committee heard this bill on January 30th of this year. I'd like to yield some time to my colleague, Councilman Ryan Dorsey, sponsor of the legislation.
Why do I get the feeling when you say sometime, you mean sometime? Chair recognizes Councilman Dorsey.
Why you want to do me like that, Mr. Council President?
I'm just playing.
Thank you, Mr. Council President. Thank you, Mr. Chair. In 2018, we made a couple changes to the city charter. One of those was to change the structure of the board that appoints the department, the head of the Department of Legislative Reference, who also serves presently as the chair, or rather as the executive director of the Ethics Board. That charter amendment that we passed here and it was approved by the voters had the effect of reducing the level of independence in the appointment of the head of the Department of Legislative Reference from the most independently established position, essentially anywhere within city government, to something less than what at the same time we were creating as the new office of the Inspector General, Inspector General's position. We created a board similar to what existed for DLR to appoint the head of the office of the Inspector General. The Inspector General's office is significantly, their mission is very significantly aligned with the purpose and mission of the Ethics Board in investigating allegations or cases where fraud, misconduct within city government, and untoward happenings are alleged or have happened. And so it makes a lot of sense that their operations should fall under one roof. And all the more so when we really do need the greatest level of independence possible overseeing the ethics administration in the city. Of note, I think, as we all know, there has never been even $1 allocated to the administration of ethics and to staffing specifically for the ethics board ever. And part of what was established in the Office of the Inspector General is that there be a board that oversees the finances of that office, ensuring that the budget of that office is adequate to meet the responsibilities of the office. So it would seem natural to me that if we assign additional duties to the Office of the Inspector General, like administration of the Board of Ethics, that some additional funding should be considered and allocated in order to be able to perform those functions. And for all these reasons, I think it only makes sense that the Ethics Board be moved from the Department of Legislative Reference to the Office of the Inspector General, and I ask for all of your support on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Councilman Henry.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the bill favorably.
All those in favor of approving this bill say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. The motion is approved. This bill moves to third reader.
Thank you.
Executive Appointments Committee.
EA 19-0259, Tiffany Wingate.
Chair recognizes Councilman Stokes.
Thank you, Mr. President. The committee held a hearing on January the 29th. I move the nomination favorable.
All those in favor of approving this nomination say aye. All opposed say nay. The nomination is approved. Land Use Committee.
City Council Bill 19-0425, Corrective Bill 2019, Zoning.
Chair recognizes Councilman Reisinger.
Mr. President, this is technical in nature. I move the bill favorable.
Thank you. All those in favor of approving this bill say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. The motion is approved. This bill moves to third reader.
City Council Bill 19-0426, rezoning, Block PSCO, Lot 085.
Chair recognizes Councilman Reisinger.
Move the finding of facts.
Without objection, the findings of fact will be adopted. The findings of fact are adopted. Chair recognizes Councilman Reisinger.
Move the bill favorable.
All those in favor of approving this bill say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. The motion is approved. This bill moves to third reader.
City Council Bill 19-0463, rezoning, Block 7762, Lots 001 to 007.
Chair recognizes Councilman Reisinger.
Move the finding of facts.
Without objection, the finding of fact will be adopted. The findings of fact are adopted. Chair recognizes Councilman Reisinger.
Move the bill favorable.
All those in favor of approving this bill say aye. All opposed say nay. All right, this bill is approved. It moves to third reader. Transportation Committee.
City Council Bill 18-0285, Police Ordinances, repealing the prohibition on playing in the street.
Chair recognizes Councilman Dorsey.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Transportation Committee heard this bill on January 29th. There are amendments on the members' desks. As the sponsor of the bill, I'll just take 1 minute here to speak about it. We heard a number of concerns about this bill, and I just wanted to address them and how they came up. People say that people have voiced concern about whether we are making our city less safe for children by simply not criminalizing childhood behavior, by not criminalizing playing in streets. In order for me to believe that our city becomes less safe for children because we stop criminalizing them, I would have to believe that it is their knowledge that it is a crime for me to bounce a ball in the middle of the street that is keeping them from currently bouncing a ball in the middle of the street. I don't believe that that's the reason. I believe that the reason that more people aren't playing in the streets in ways that are unsafe is because it is obviously unsafe, and that we can adequately rely on people's common sense and sense of self-preservation as to not put themselves into unsafe positions. I believe that we can also rely on parents to teach their kids what it means to be in safe and unsafe circumstances. I believe that we have the opportunity to allow individuals and communities to police themselves and to be self-aware enough that we're not creating incredibly unsafe circumstances for people without criminalizing the simple act of play. We also heard about, well, what if people obstruct traffic? We don't want people to be a nuisance because they're playing in the street. If we really wanted to cite somebody with a violation of a misdemeanor offense or a civil citation for obstructing a street, there's a separate law for that specifically. We don't have to criminalize the act of play. When people say, well, what if those kids in the neighborhood hit my vehicle with their ball and cause damage to it? There's a separate law that prohibits people from damaging other people's property. We don't have to criminalize the act of play, which I believe is a human right and which we understand is fundamental to human development. And because I believe we're not making our city less safe and just creating less of an opportunity to be criminalized for natural human behaviors, I would ask that everybody support this bill. I move the amendments that are on the member's desk.
All those in favor of approving the amendment say aye. All opposed say nay. The amendment, please note Councilman Pinkett is a no. Chair recognizes Councilman Dorsey.
Mr. President, I move the bill favorable as amended.
All those in favor of approving this bill say aye. All those opposed say nay. Please note Councilman Pinkett and Councilwoman Clark and Councilman Stokes as nays. This motion is approved. This bill moves to third reader. Third reader for final passage.
City Council Bill 19-0320, Passenger for Hire Services Tax Corrective. President Scott, Cohen, McCray, Dorsey, Henry, Schleifer, Middleton, Pinkett, Burnett, Bullock, Reisinger, Costello, Stokes, Snead, Clark.
This bill is approved.
City Council Bill 19-0383, City Streets Closing, Bauer-Schmidt Alley, and two 10-foot alleys bounded by North Gay Street, East Oliver Street, North Washington Street, and Federal Street. President Scott, Cohen, McCray, Dorsey, Henry, Schleifer, Middleton, Pinkett, Burnett, Reisinger, Bullock, Reisinger, Costello, Stokes, Snead, Clark.
This bill is approved.
City Council Bill 19-0445, zoning conditional use conversion of a single-family dwelling unit to two dwelling units in the R7 zoning district, 817 Chauncey Avenue. President Scott, Cohen, McCray, Dorsey, Henry, Schleifer, Middleton, Pinkett, Burnett, Bullock, Reisinger, Costello, Stokes, Snead, Clark.
This bill is approved.
City Council Bill 19-0448, sale of property, 801 Bradish Avenue. President Scott, Cohen, McCray, Dorsey, Henry, Schleifer, Middleton, Pinkett, Burnett, Bullock, Reisinger, Costello, Stokes, Snead, Clark.
This bill is approved.
City Council Bill 19-0454, rezoning, Block 7653C, Lot 029. President Scott, Cohen, McCray, Dorsey, Henry, Schleifer, Middleton, Pinkett, Burnett, Bullock, Reisinger, Costello, Stokes, Snead, Clark.
This bill is approved.
City Council Bill 19-0469, release of easement 10 South Howard Street. President Scott, Cohen, McCray, Dorsey, Henry, Schleifer, Middleton, Pinkett, Burnett, Bullock, Reisinger, Costello, Stokes, Snead, Clark.
This bill is approved.
City Council Bill 19-0479, property tax credit, low-income employees of the City of Baltimore. President Scott, Cohen, McCray, Dorsey, Henry, Schleifer, Middleton, Pinkett, Burnett, Bullock, Reisinger, Costello, Stokes, Snead, Clark.
This bill is approved. Committee announcements. If there is no objection, we will suspend Rule 9-7 to refer the following bill read by the clerk to the Land Use Committee from the former Land Use and Transportation Committee.
City Council Bill 19-0359, open space zoning districts.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Snead.
I move to suspend Rule 10-2 and 2-3 to announce a hearing.
Without objection, the rules will be suspended. The rules are suspended.
I'm wanting to announce that where the Labor Committee is going to have a informational hearing on Wednesday, February the 19th, 2020 at 5 p.m. The hearing is going to be for Bill number 20-0193R for the purpose of inviting representatives from the Mayor's Office of Employment Development and the Mayor's Office of Children and Family Success to brief the City Council on the state of the labor market, particularly regarding youth unemployment and the employment of returning citizens. The next bill we have is the Legislative Oversight Work Session for the Labor Committee, Bill number L019-0053 for Thursday, February the 20th at 1 p.m. And this is for the purpose of holding a legislative oversight hearing to have the Baltimore City Fire Department update the committee on staffing, promotional practices, and internal succession planning. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Councilman Bullock.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Housing and Urban Affairs Committee will be holding a hearing on City Council Bill 190179R on February 25th at 2 p.m. It is the informational hearing for BGE planned outages introduced by Councilman Henry. On Tuesday, March 24th at 2 p.m. here in Council Chambers, we'll be hearing City Council Bill 190173R, approval for the exchange of a BD7 license for use at 604 South Exeter Street, introduced by Councilman Cohen. And then at 2:15 p.m. on March 24th, we'll be hearing City Council Bill 190429, vacant structures posting owner information, introduced by Councilman Burnett. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Councilman Burnett.
Thank you, Mr. President. On Wednesday, March 4th, 2020 at 5 p.m., the Legislative Investigations Committee will have a legislative oversight hearing on commercial water bills for the purpose of investigating the depth and scope of the city's underbilling of commercial water customers. And on Wednesday, April 1st, the Legislative Investigations Committee will have a hearing at 5 p.m. On the lock-in letters from the Internal Revenue Service for due diligence in the selection of law enforcement appointees. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Councilman Costello.
Thank you, Mr. President. Budget and Appropriations Committee will hold 2 hearings on Tuesday, February 27th. The first is at 2 p.m., 17-0003R, quarterly budget briefings with the Department of Finance, Bureau of Budget and Management Research. And then at 2 p.m., 17-0004R, quarterly budget oversight hearings for Baltimore City Public Schools. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Councilman Reisinger.
Mr. President, the Land Use Committee will hold a hearing on Bill 19-0480 on Wednesday, March the 4th at 1:05 p.m. in the Council Chambers. This is zoning use standards for neighborhood commercial establishments. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. This side, committee announcements. Chair recognizes Councilman Henry.
Thank you, Mr. President. On Wednesday, February 26th at 5 p.m., the Equity and Structure Committee will hear City Council Bill 20-0489, Charter Amendment, Board of Estimates Composition. For the next one, I need to suspend Rules 10.2 and 10.3.
Without objection, the rules will be suspended. The rules are suspended.
On Wednesday, February 26th at 5:01 p.m., the Equity and Structure Committee will hear 20-0491, Charter Amendment, City Auditor Powers and Duties. I need to suspend Rules 10.2 and 10.3.
Without objection, the rules will be suspended.
On Wednesday, February 26th at 5:02 p.m., we will hear, the Equity and Structure Committee will hear 20-0492, Charter Amendment, City Council Reduction in Size. Thank you.
Thank you. Regular announcements. Regular announcements, I will start. Coming into today, we had 34 homicides. That was a 17% increase over what we had last year, and we all know last year is the worst year that we ever had. We keep hearing that the crime plan is working, and that we have to give it time. We don't have time. We need a crime plan that's working today. Yesterday, we celebrated Councilman Cohen's Trauma Care Act during a ceasefire weekend, and we know how important that piece of legislation that is now law, and how important organizations and community efforts like Ceasefire are to our efforts here, led by this council, to have a complete and comprehensive public safety strategy for Baltimore. However, just as important, as critically important to that, is actually having a strategy to deal with violent repeat offenders and the flow of illegal guns into Baltimore. And that's what we need right now. We need to see that once and for all. We need to see action on that, so that when we're at our hearings with the police department, that we can actually see that those are the people that we're focusing on. Because right now, and we've had at least 4 more during the day today, right now, the citizens of Baltimore don't see that, and I don't see that from where I sit. And we're going to continue to hold them accountable, but we need action, not just for the long term, right? I always say, fighting crime in Baltimore is like being on the Acela train and the regional at the same time. We're going to do our due diligence. We're going to make every effort to making sure that we're investing in the long-term root causes to deal with violence, but it does not mean that we forget about the people that are dying every day. And most importantly, we definitely should not forget about the people who are killing, robbing people in our city. We must root them out of our communities and get rid of them. With that, Councilwoman, I would like to ask you, Council Vice President, I would like to ask you to honor a moment of silence for the 34 and growing number of victims of homicides in Baltimore and their families, and of course all of those that we continue to lose to the overdose crisis as well. Any other regular announcements? Chair recognizes Council Vice President Middleton.
Thank you, Mr. President. The next meeting of the City Council will be held on Monday, February 24th, 2020 at 5 p.m. And may we have a moment of silence for the families of the 34+ victims of homicide, and also our continued prayers to families that suffer from the opioid epidemic.
Thank you. The next meeting of the City Council will be held on Monday, 24th at 5 p.m. There being no further business, this concludes the 77th meeting of the 72nd term of the Baltimore City Council.